Josh swiped through the shelter's online gallery, his heart a mix of hope and hesitation. Each face that flickered past his screen seemed to whisper promises of companionship, yet none could guarantee to fill the void Max left behind. It had been a year, 365 long, silent days since his boisterous buddy had vanished. The house, once filled with the echoes of paws and playful barks, now lay unsettlingly quiet. "Maybe it's time," he muttered to himself, closing his eyes to summon the courage that had dwindled over the months. The decision was ripe with the possibility of joy, shadowed by the fear of betrayal to the memory of his lost friend. Would adopting another dog betray Max's memory, or honor it? His finger hovered over the register button for the upcoming shelter open house. "He wouldn't want me to be lonely," Josh whispered, clicking the button. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips, a rare visitor since Max's disappearance. His mind fluttered back to the countless days spent searching for any sign of Max, the endless posters, calls, and visits to local shelters. All fruitless. Now, he hoped a new companion might ease the ache, might mute the emptiness. A sigh escaped him, blending with the stillness of the room, a room waiting to be filled again. With a newfound resolve, Josh made his way to the shelter the following Saturday, the hum of nervous excitement lining his thoughts. As he pushed open the heavy front doors, a chorus of barks and whines greeted him, each sound a call for attention, a plea for a second chance. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and damp fur, a stark reminder of the many lives that passed through here, all hoping for a better ending. Josh's eyes scanned the rows of kennels, each one a small vignette of longing. Dogs of all sizes and breeds pressed against the chain-link barriers, their tails wagging in blurred frenzies of hope. Some jumped excitedly, others paced restlessly, but all watched him with eager eyes. The shelter staff, noticing his arrival, approached with warm smiles. "Looking for someone special?" one of them asked, her voice a blend of cheer and empathy. "Just browsing for now," Josh replied, his voice slightly unsure, betraying the emotional weight of his mission. The staffer nodded understandingly and offered him a small guidebook to the shelter. "Take your time," she said. "They all deserve a good look." As he walked slowly past the kennels, Josh felt a tug at his heart with each hopeful face. He noted how each kennel was kept clean and well-maintained, with water bowls filled and toys scattered about, small comforts for the inhabitants. The walls, adorned with cheerful paintings of pets, seemed to brighten the otherwise somber atmosphere. Overhead, fluorescent lights hummed steadily, casting an artificial glow that reflected off the polished floors. His gaze lingered on a particularly spirited young Labrador that followed him eagerly with its eyes, tail thumping rhythmically against the side of its cage. Josh paused, offering a gentle smile and a soft word, feeling a pang of connection. But the nagging feeling in his gut told him to keep looking. He continued on, each step bringing a mix of sadness and hope. As Josh neared the end of the aisle, he approached a kennel that seemed quieter than the rest. Inside, a dog lay curled up in the corner, its body language one of defeat rather than anticipation. The staff had mentioned that some dogs took longer to adjust, their spirits worn down by too many goodbyes. This one barely glanced up as he approached, its eyes dull and resigned. Josh's heart clenched. He knew that look all too well, the same look that had haunted him in the mirror not so long ago. The connection was instant, a silent understanding of shared pain. He knelt down, his voice soft but hopeful. "Hey there," he whispered. "I know how you feel." The dog's ears twitched and it lifted its head slightly, meeting his gaze with a tentative look of recognition. Could this be the companion he was seeking? The air seemed to still as the dog's gaze locked with Josh's, an inexplicable recognition flickering in its sad eyes. Something stirred within Josh, a spark of possibility that nudged at the edges of his rational mind. He leaned closer, studying the subtle nuances of the dog's face, the white patch on its muzzle, the gentle slope of its forehead. Memories cascaded through his thoughts, each one a vivid flashback of Max and their days filled with laughter and loyalty. Could it be? Josh murmured under his breath, his heart racing with a mixture of hope and doubt. The dog's tail gave a weak wag, its body language shifting as if it sensed the significance of the moment. Josh reached out slowly, his hand trembling as he called softly, "Max?" At the sound of his name, the dog's posture changed. It stood slowly, its movements cautious but purposeful, as if each step was measured and fraught with emotion. The dog's tail began to wag more vigorously, a spark of life reigniting in its eyes. A staff member noticed Josh's intense focus and walked over, her approach quiet and respectful. "You know this one?" she asked gently, curiosity lacing her voice. Josh swallowed, his eyes never leaving the dog's face. I think he might be my dog, Max. I lost him over a year ago," he explained, his voice a mix of hope and hesitation. The staffer looked at the dog, then back at Josh, a soft smile spreading across her face. "That's incredible. He's been here for a few months, and he's never reacted to anyone like this before. We called him Spot, but he didn't really respond to it." Josh knelt down, extending his hand through the bars. The dog approached, its steps tentative, but filled with an emerging trust. As it neared, Josh's fingers brushed against the fur, and the dog nuzzled into his palm, letting out a soft whimper that sounded like relief, like homecoming. Tears welled up in Josh's eyes as memories of Max playing in the yard, their daily walks, and the night he disappeared flooded back. The pain of the months spent searching, wondering, and hoping felt both distant and fresh in this singular, overwhelming moment. "It's really you, isn't it, buddy?" Josh's voice broke, choked with emotion. The reunion, tentative at first, grew as Max, no longer Spot, recognized the love and longing in Josh's voice, his presence a balm to the wounds of time spent apart. In the quiet of the shelter, surrounded by the muted sounds of other dogs, a small miracle unfolded as man and dog reconnected, the past and present blurring into a moment of pure joy. As Max's nose pressed into Josh's palm, a whirlwind of recognition seemed to ignite within him. His body trembled slightly, not just from the chill of the shelter, but from the surge of emotions overwhelming him. His tail, now wagging with vigor, beat a rhythm of rediscovered happiness, stirring the dusty air of the kennel. His whines grew louder, a symphony of joyous cries that filled the space between the bars that still separated them. Josh's voice became a beacon, guiding Max's resurgence. "Max, it's me. It's really me," he repeated, each word soaked in tears and warmth. Max responded with heightened enthusiasm, his paws dancing lightly on the cold floor, his eyes shimmering with a mixture of tears and recognition. The bond that had been tested by time and circumstance was rekindling in these precious moments, reigniting with every shared glance and whispered affirmation. In the kennel, Max began to perform the familiar dance of excitement he always did when Josh came home from work, circling, jumping lightly, a display of affection and uncontained happiness. "You remember, don't you? You remember us?" Josh laughed through his tears, the sound a balm to Max's long-stressed heart. Their reunion was a private symphony of cries and whispers. Each call of Max and each whimper from the dog wove a tapestry of past joys and future promises. The shelter staff stood back, witnesses to the profound connection unfolding, a rare glimpse into the depth of the human-animal bond. "Look at you, buddy," Josh managed to say, his voice choked with emotion as he studied Max's face, noting each familiar mark, each sign of the hardships the dog had faced. The scars were there, not just on Max's body, but in his eyes too, wisps of sorrow that might never fully fade. Yet, in this moment, joy was the overwhelming emotion. For both man and dog, a joy that spilled over and touched everyone in its vicinity. Max's response to Josh's presence was a testament to their undying connection, a clear signal that no amount of time apart could erase what they had. This was not just a reunion. It was a restoration of a friendship that neither distance nor time could sever. The shelter's atmosphere shifted perceptibly as Josh and Max's reunion unfolded. The usual cacophony of barks and whines softened, as if the other dogs sensed the importance of the moment. The staff moved through the background, attending to chores, but their glances often returned to the pair, smiles creasing their faces at the sight of such raw, unabashed joy. Josh opened the gate to Max's kennel, and with a grace that belied his recent hardships, Max stepped out. He was thinner than Josh remembered, his coat not as lustrous, but none of that mattered now. They were together again. Josh knelt to embrace him fully, his arms wrapping around the broad shoulders of his once-lost friend. Max leaned into the hug, his body vibrating with every pant and whimper, expressing what words never could. The reunion was a blend of tears and laughter, a cascade of shared memories and unspoken promises. "We've got a lot of catching up to do, Max," Josh murmured, stroking the dog's back, tracing the familiar patterns of his fur. Max responded by nuzzling his face into Josh's chest, affirming his understanding and his relief. The shelter staff gathered at a respectful distance, their work momentarily forgotten. "It's like he knew you'd come back for him," one of the caretakers remarked, her voice thick with emotion. "It's a real miracle," another added, clutching a clipboard to her chest as she watched the scene unfold. As Josh stood up, Max stayed close by his side, his gaze fixed on Josh as if to reassure himself that this wasn't just a dream. They walked together toward the small park area behind the shelter, a place where potential adopters could spend time getting to know their new pets. The gravel crunched under Josh's feet, the familiar sound a reminder of the many walks he and Max had shared in the past. In this quiet, secluded spot, Josh threw a ball he found lying on the grass, watching as Max chased after it with a gusto that belied the months of hardship. His movements were slower than before, but each leap and bound was a testament to his indomitable spirit. As Max retrieved the ball and trotted back, a sense of normalcy began to settle over them, a hint of the old routines that they both cherished. "What changes now?" Josh whispered to himself as he watched Max play. The answer seemed clear. Everything and nothing. They would resume their walks, their games, their quiet evenings together. But they would also navigate the reality of Max's year away, the challenges of reintegration, the physical and emotional healing that would need to occur. It was a future fraught with uncertainty, but also brimming with potential. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the shelter, Josh felt a profound sense of closure mingled with a new beginning. Max was home, and together they would forge a new path, one filled with renewed hope and the comfort of each other's presence. As the shadows lengthened and the shelter began to quiet down for the evening, Josh's thoughts turned to the promise he had made himself on the day Max disappeared, a promise to never let his backyard be a place of loss again, but one of hope. Holding Max's leash gently in his hand, Josh felt the weight of that promise now more than ever. Max seemed rejuvenated by the familiar gestures of play and affection, but Josh knew their story was not yet complete. There was room in his home and his heart for another soul in need, a thought that had been solidifying with each step he took through the shelter earlier. "What do you think, Max? Should we find you a brother?" Josh asked, looking down at Max, who responded with a soft bark, his tail wagging in the calm, knowing way of a dog who has seen much. Empowered by Max's apparent approval, Josh turned back toward the shelter. The staff, recognizing his intent, smiled knowingly. "Found one you like?" one of the volunteers asked as they approached. "There was one," Josh began, his mind replaying the image of the quiet pit bull he'd seen earlier, the one that hadn't jumped at the bars or barked, but had simply watched him with wise, waiting eyes. He seemed like he could use a friend. Guided by the volunteer, Josh and Max walked to the kennel, where the pit bull, named Bruno by the shelter staff, lay quietly. Bruno's gaze lifted as they approached, his demeanor calm yet expectant. Josh knelt down, extending his hand for Bruno to sniff, a gesture met with a gentle nudge of Bruno's nose. Hey there, Bruno. Want to come home with us? Bruno's tail began to wag slowly, cautiously, as if not to disturb the hopeful silence that enveloped them. The volunteer opened Bruno's kennel and with a gentle encouragement, Bruno stepped out. Max sniffed Bruno politely, the usual canine introductions unfolding with peaceful sniffs and tail wags. With a deep sense of fulfillment, Josh watched the two dogs interact, Max's presence seemingly giving Bruno a newfound confidence. It was a decision made not out of impulse, but a profound sense of responsibility. Josh wasn't just rescuing another dog, he was building a family. As they walked to the front desk to complete the adoption papers, Josh felt a surge of resolve. This was right. It felt like the piece of his heart that had been missing was slowly mending back together. "We're going to be okay," he whispered to both dogs, a promise that extended beyond the walls of the shelter into the life they would now share. Max and Bruno, side by side, seemed to understand as they trotted along, their steps in sync, a new pack formed by fate and a shared second chance. With the adoption papers signed and the sun casting its last golden hues over the day, Josh led Max and Bruno to his car. The ride home was a quiet one, the dogs resting close to each other, their breaths synchronizing in the confined space. As they arrived and stepped into the familiar surroundings of Josh's home, Bruno hesitated at the threshold, his body tense with the uncertainty of a new beginning. Max seemed to sense his new companion's reluctance and nudged him gently with his nose, encouraging him forward. Bruno's first tentative steps into the house were met with a wagging tail from Max, as if reassuring him that this place was safe, that this was home now. Josh watched them with a mixture of joy and relief. "Welcome home, Bruno," he said softly, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet of the entryway. Bruno looked up at him, his tail wagging slightly faster now, as if in acknowledgement of Josh's welcome. In the backyard, which had once been a place of loss, the scene transformed as Max and Bruno began to explore their new shared space. Max took the lead, showing Bruno the best sniffing spots and the coolest patches of grass for resting. They chased each other around, the tension in Bruno's body unwinding with each playful sprint. Josh leaned against the doorframe, watching the two dogs create their own language of play and companionship. The sight of them together, Max, once lost and now found, and Bruno, once withdrawn and now blossoming, filled him with an indescribable sense of fulfillment. "We did good, didn't we, boys?" he called out to them, laughter coloring his voice. Their response was a chorus of barks, and Josh laughed, a sound rich with happiness and newfound peace. As the day faded into evening, the three of them settled onto the porch, the dogs laying their heads on Josh's lap. In this simple, serene moment, the promise of new beginnings was palpable, the past hardships receding into the backdrop of their new life together. Bruno's adjustment to his new home seemed to unfold naturally, his trust in Josh and Max deepening with each passing moment. As days turned into weeks, the rhythms of life with Max and Bruno settled into a joyful normalcy. Inspired by their journeys and the profound impact of adopting from a shelter, Josh decided to channel his gratitude into action. He started a social media campaign to share their stories, hoping to illuminate the joy and transformative power of adoption. Josh spent evenings at his computer, crafting posts that blended heartfelt narratives with captivating photos of Max and Bruno playing, resting, and enjoying their new life. He titled the campaign Second Chances, emphasizing the positive changes adoption can bring to dogs and their new families alike. With each post, he shared tips on caring for rescues, the importance of fixing fences, and the joy of companionship. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Followers shared the posts widely, tagging friends and family, sparking discussions about the merits of adopting. Local media picked up on the story, inviting Josh to speak about his experience and the broader implications of shelter adoption. Seeing Max and Bruno thrive has been a reminder of how many other dogs are out there waiting for their second chance, Josh explained in one interview, his message resonating with viewers. Comments flooded in, each one a testament to the shifting perceptions. Your story inspired us to visit our local shelter. We're bringing home a new family member next week, one follower wrote. Another shared, I've always bought dogs from breeders, but seeing Max and Bruno's transformation has opened my eyes to adoption. Josh's campaign soon partnered with local shelters, coordinating adoption events that became community highlights. The shelters reported a notable increase in visits and adoptions, attributing this surge in interest to the powerful narrative Josh had shared. In his quiet moments, Josh scrolled through the feedback, his heart swelling with pride and hope. The tangible impact of his efforts showed in the bustling adoption days, in the faces of families leaving with new companions, and in the energetic wagging of tails from dogs finding homes. As he posted another update, a photo of Max and Bruno napping peacefully together, Josh reflected on the journey that led here. Together, we're making a difference, he typed, his words a bridge connecting his personal joy to a communal movement. With each shared story and each adopted dog, the campaign continued to ripple outward, reshaping lives and offering new beginnings.